Stop and pay attention, because what is unfolding today is not a passing mood, a minor cosmic shift, or an energy you can simply dismiss and move on from. Something far more consequential is taking shape above you right now, and whether you realize it or not, it is already moving through your emotional world. At this very moment, Venus and Pluto stand directly opposite one another in the sky, separated by a perfect 180-degree opposition. When these two forces confront each other so directly, the result is never subtle. This is not an influence that gently taps on the door of your awareness. It arrives like a revelation that can no longer be postponed. It forces hidden realities into the light and demands honesty where illusion once lived. If the last several days have felt strangely uncomfortable, if there has been a pressure you could not explain, a lingering sense that something beneath the surface was reaching a breaking point, then what you have been feeling is not imaginary. Your intuition has been responding to a process that was already underway long before today arrived. June 17th is simply the moment when everything becomes impossible to ignore. Venus, the planetary force associated with affection, connection, desire, and emotional attachment, now faces Pluto, the force linked to transformation, exposure, power, and the truths that hide beneath appearances. They are staring directly at one another, and the tension created by that encounter is impossible to contain forever. Something must give. Something must reveal itself. Something that has been avoiding the spotlight can no longer remain concealed. The deeper question is not whether change is coming. The deeper question is whether you are prepared to see what has been standing in front of you all along. Perhaps you have noticed physical sensations that seem disconnected from logic. Maybe your body has been reacting before your thoughts can catch up. A sudden tightening in your stomach, a racing heartbeat that appears without warning, unexpected emotional waves that seem to emerge from nowhere. These reactions may feel confusing, but they are connected to a much larger story, one that becomes clearer as we move deeper into today's alignment. There is a very specific reason these energies are expressing themselves physically, and understanding that reason changes everything. Before we get there, however, you need to understand why this day represents a turning point, rather than a simple astrological event. For 3 zodiac signs in particular, this alignment marks one of the most emotionally demanding relationship tests they will encounter throughout the entire year. The striking part is that many people walking into this experience believe everything is proceeding normally. They do not yet recognize what has been developing beneath the surface. What appears sudden today has actually been forming for weeks. Many people imagine that an opposition like this begins the moment it becomes exact, as though the sky suddenly changes overnight and the emotional atmosphere instantly grows heavier. In reality, cosmic events rarely operate that way. They build, they accumulate, they develop layer by layer until the pressure becomes impossible to contain. The process began on June 9th, when Venus joined Jupiter in Cancer. Think back to the emotional atmosphere surrounding that period. There may have been a renewed sense of optimism, a feeling of warmth, a belief that matters of the heart were finally moving in the right direction. Hope expanded. Possibilities appeared larger. Emotional security seemed easier to reach. Yet what looked like resolution was not necessarily resolution at all. Jupiter's role is expansion. It magnifies whatever it touches. As Venus met Jupiter, emotional expectations grew larger, desires became stronger, and confidence increased. The heart opened wider. The risks became greater. The importance of the situation intensified. Then came June 13th, when Venus entered Leo. Suddenly, the emotional experience shifted. Love was no longer only about connection. It became intertwined with visibility, recognition, validation, the desire to feel special, the desire to feel chosen. The desire to know that your place in someone's heart was undeniable. Relationships became linked to pride, identity, and the need to be seen. Then yesterday introduced another layer to the story. Venus formed a trine with Neptune, wrapping everything in an atmosphere that felt almost magical. The emotional landscape became softer, more idealistic, more enchanting. Romantic connections appeared touched by destiny. Interactions felt meaningful beyond explanation. The future seemed illuminated by possibility. Neptune's influence can create beauty that feels breathtakingly real. Yet there is something important many people fail to recognize. Neptune often blurs the edges between what is true and what is hoped for. It can create a dream so convincing that the dream temporarily becomes more visible than reality itself. That dreamlike quality reached its peak yesterday. But today the atmosphere changes entirely. Pluto has no interest in maintaining appearances. Pluto is not concerned with preserving fantasies or protecting comforting stories. Pluto wants authenticity. Pluto wants depth. Pluto wants what remains after every illusion has been stripped away. This is why the emotional contrast between yesterday and today may feel so dramatic. One moment you were looking at life through a lens of possibility and idealism. The next moment you are being asked to confront what actually exists beneath the surface. It can feel as though you fell asleep inside a beautiful vision and woke up face to face with a truth that refuses to be ignored. And perhaps the most remarkable part is that your body may already understand this shift before your conscious mind fully does. Earlier, I mentioned the physical sensations many people have been experiencing. Here is why they are becoming impossible to overlook. This morning, the moon entered Leo. The moon governs instinctive responses, emotional processing, bodily awareness, and the deeper rhythms of the nervous system. As it moved into Leo, it joined Venus, placing both energies together directly opposite Pluto. The result is that the tension generated by this opposition is not remaining in the realm of abstract thought. It is moving into the physical experience of the body itself. You may have awakened, feeling restless without understanding why. You may have sensed an unusual alertness, as though some invisible part of you was preparing for an important moment. Some people are noticing persistent tension in the center of the body. Others are experiencing sudden surges of emotional intensity or unexpected changes in their heartbeat. What makes this significant is that these sensations may not be random at all. They may represent recognition. Deep within the nervous system, awareness often arrives before conscious understanding. The body detects patterns. It notices inconsistencies. It responds to realities that the mind may still be attempting to explain away. Under today's Venus, Moon, and Pluto configuration, that deeper recognition becomes louder. It begins drawing attention towards something within your relationship, your emotional attachment, or your personal circumstances that has been waiting to be acknowledged. Perhaps it is a truth you have postponed confronting. Perhaps it is something you have softened with comforting explanations. Perhaps it is a reality you have wrapped in hopeful language because facing it directly felt too uncomfortable. Whatever form it takes, the energy of today is steadily guiding your awareness toward it. And as this story continues to unfold, what is revealed next may explain why everything has been building toward this exact moment. There is one realization hidden inside today's energy that many people are going to resist with every part of themselves. And yet it is the very thing that can no longer be avoided. The moment the moon became entangled in this opposition, the rules changed. This stopped being a situation that could be solved through analysis alone. Logic is no longer sitting in the driver's seat. You cannot create enough explanations to silence what your deeper instincts are trying to communicate. You cannot construct a convincing narrative that everything is stable if every signal within you is pointing toward the opposite conclusion. The emotional and physical responses surfacing now are not obstacles to understanding. They are the understanding. They are the evidence. They are the first messenger arriving before the conscious mind has fully opened the door. In many ways, your body has already recognized what your thoughts are still attempting to negotiate. The awareness is already there. The acceptance is what comes next. And this is precisely the territory Pluto specializes in. Pluto is not interested in preserving comfort. Pluto is interested in revelation. It wants what has been buried to rise. It wants what has been hidden beneath carefully arranged appearances to become visible. That is why what is happening today reaches far beyond ordinary emotional intensity. This is not simply a day when feelings run high. This is a day when realities become difficult to disguise. To understand the magnitude of this moment, you need to look beneath the visible surface of your relationships. Venus, currently traveling through Leo, naturally seeks warmth, admiration, affection, and the kind of love that feels vibrant and unmistakable. Leo wants romance to be expressed openly. It wants the heart to be celebrated rather than concealed. At its highest expression, this energy is extraordinarily brave. It loves with loyalty. It protects fiercely. It gives generously. It is willing to stand proudly beside the people it cherishes. There is beauty in that. There is strength in that. Yet directly across the sky stands Pluto in Aquarius, and Pluto is asking an entirely different question. Pluto has no interest in appearances. It is not impressed by carefully curated images, public gestures, or symbolic displays that look convincing from a distance. It wants to know what remains after all of those layers are removed. It wants to know what happens when the audience disappears, when the spotlight turns off, when nobody is left to applaud. Beneath the smiles, beneath the declarations, beneath the carefully maintained version of the story, what is actually true? That single question carries enormous power because it immediately exposes every structure built on illusion. Throughout today, this opposition acts like a force pulling away decorative coverings from the most private corners of your emotional life. Suddenly, the issue is no longer how things appear. The issue becomes how things function, not the explanation you give other people, not the version of events repeated often enough to feel believable, not the story created to make difficult circumstances seem easier to tolerate. The focus shifts to the reality itself, untouched and unedited. As that process unfolds, uncomfortable observations may begin surfacing. Situations that once seemed normal may suddenly look very different. You may begin noticing places where influence has quietly transformed into control. You may recognize moments where one person has gradually taken authority over decisions, resources, schedules, or choices, while presenting that behavior as responsibility or protection. What once looked supportive may reveal an entirely different motive underneath. Some may discover that attachment has crossed a line and become possessiveness. Others may recognize patterns where jealousy has been repeatedly excused because it appeared passionate on the surface. There may be situations where constant oversight has been mistaken for commitment, where surveillance has disguised itself as devotion, where fear has dressed itself in the language of loyalty. These are not pleasant realizations. They rarely arrive gently. Yet this is exactly why Pluto's influence is so transformative. It shines light into places where people have grown accustomed to darkness. It asks questions that many would prefer not to answer. Are you remaining in a situation because genuine love continues to exist there, or because the unknown feels more frightening than the gradual loss of your own identity? Are you protecting a relationship, or are you protecting an image of what you hoped that relationship would become? These questions can feel unsettling because they challenge emotional investments that may have existed for years. Yet under today's opposition, avoidance becomes increasingly difficult. The pressure is too focused, too exact, too persistent. The mask begins to weaken. The explanations begin to crack. And when the truth finally becomes visible, it alters everything that follows. This is why so many astrologers describe this alignment as a fated love test, though the phrase is often misunderstood. Many people hear those words and imagine temporary relationship tension, a brief emotional challenge, or a romantic obstacle that eventually fades away without consequence. That interpretation barely scratches the surface of what Venus opposite Pluto represents. This is not a small detour on the journey. It is a defining intersection. It is a moment where the universe places a choice directly in front of you and refuses to let you walk around it. The significance of fate is not that a fairy tale suddenly appears. The significance of fate is that a long-developing process reaches the moment of decision. It means circumstances that have been building beneath awareness finally demand action. It means patterns that have been operating for months or even years can no longer remain hidden. Some of those patterns may be deeply personal. Others may stretch back through family conditioning, past experiences, old wounds, or lessons that were never fully learned. Whatever their origin, they are rising now because they have reached their threshold. They have arrived at the point where continuation without transformation is no longer possible. For relationships grounded in authenticity, mutual respect, emotional courage, and a willingness to confront difficult truths together, today's energy can create extraordinary strengthening. There is a unique kind of bond formed when two people face discomfort honestly instead of running from it. Relationships capable of enduring Pluto's scrutiny often emerge more resilient because they are no longer supported by fantasy. They are supported by truth. Yet not every connection is built on that foundation. Some relationships survive only because difficult conversations have been postponed. Some endure because one person consistently sacrifices their needs while the other receives the spotlight. Some are held together by unresolved pain that has been mistaken for passion. Others continue because silence has become easier than honesty. Those are the structures most vulnerable under today's opposition. Deep within yourself, beneath every explanation and every defense, there is likely already an awareness of where your own situation stands. The soul often knows before the mind is willing to admit it, and that is why this test is so significant. It is not measuring whether a relationship can survive pressure. It is measuring whether the connection rests upon something genuine enough to deserve survival in the first place. As this energy continues to unfold, one sign in particular is about to confront a truth so personal and so revealing that it may redefine how they understand love, identity, and themselves altogether. Leo. This next part is where everything becomes impossible to ignore. For those carrying Leo as their sun, moon, or rising sign, the energy unfolding today is not arriving as a lesson about another person. It is arriving as a direct encounter with yourself. Beneath every conversation, every emotional reaction, and every relationship dynamic currently unfolding, there is a deeper story emerging. And that story centers on the foundation of your identity. Venus is traveling through Leo right now, amplifying qualities you know well. You may have felt an increase in confidence, a stronger awareness of your presence, a desire to express yourself more boldly, or an intensified longing to feel appreciated, recognized, and cherished. These desires are not weaknesses. They are natural expressions of Leo energy. At its highest level, Leo understands that love should be celebrated, that affection should be visible, and that the heart deserves to shine openly rather than hide in the shadows. Yet today's opposition introduces a challenge that reaches much deeper than surface validation. Across the sky, Pluto occupies your partnership sector, and rather than examining the behavior of the people around you, it is directing your attention inward. Imagine standing before a mirror that reflects not your appearance, but the motivations hidden beneath your choices. That is the mirror Pluto is holding today. And what it reveals may feel uncomfortable because it forces an examination of questions that many Leos spend years avoiding. Somewhere beneath the desire to be loved, have you become dependent on being admired? Somewhere beneath the joy of giving, have you unconsciously tied your worth to how much appreciation you receive in return? Somewhere beneath the role of protector, supporter, or source of strength, have you quietly built an identity that depends on being indispensable to someone else? These questions strike at the very center of Leo's journey, because when self-worth becomes dependent upon external validation, something subtle begins to happen. Power starts moving away from the self and into the hands of others. The need for approval gradually becomes more influential than personal truth. The desire to remain important becomes stronger than the desire to remain authentic. Pluto is exposing that exchange today. It is revealing the hidden price that accompanies relationships where self-esteem is built upon applause rather than inner certainty. Perhaps you've been investing enormous energy into maintaining a role. Perhaps you have been the strong one, the dependable one, the shining one, the person everyone turns toward. Yet beneath that role, there may be exhaustion. Beneath that performance, there may be uncertainty. Beneath the image, there may be a quiet fear that without recognition, you would no longer know who you are. Pluto has arrived to challenge that fear directly, because the moment your identity depends on another person's validation, your freedom becomes vulnerable. The person supplying that validation gains influence over your emotional reality, whether either of you intends it or not. This is particularly powerful for Leos, born during approximately the first week of the sign, from July 23rd through August 1st, because the current transit is activating sensitive degrees connected to your personal chart. Yet every Leo will feel some version of this awakening. The discomfort comes from realizing where power has been surrendered. The liberation comes from reclaiming it. Hidden beneath today's challenge is an extraordinary gift. The moment you stop seeking proof of your value through someone else's attention and begin generating that value from within, something remarkable occurs. You become emotionally sovereign, not detached, not distant, not closed off, simply rooted in a sense of worth that no longer rises or falls according to another person's response. That is the transformation Pluto is attempting to initiate. Yet transformation always requires release. Before a stronger understanding of love can emerge, an older version of love may need to dissolve. Now the focus shifts to Aquarius, because what is happening for you carries an entirely different lesson. Aquarius, you may believe that maintaining emotional distance has protected you from pain, but today's opposition is challenging that belief in ways that are impossible to ignore. Pluto has been moving through your sign, steadily reshaping your understanding of yourself. Layer by layer, assumptions about who you are and how you relate to others have been undergoing profound reconstruction. Now, Venus in Leo stands directly opposite your position in the zodiac, shining an intense spotlight on the area of life that Aquarius often finds most difficult: emotional exposure. Throughout your life, you may have taken pride in your ability to remain calm when situations become emotionally charged. You may be the person who can step back, observe objectively, and maintain perspective while others become overwhelmed by feeling. That ability has value. It reflects intelligence, self-awareness, and emotional regulation. Yet under today's configuration, a deeper truth is surfacing. Sometimes detachment is wisdom. Sometimes detachment is protection. And sometimes detachment becomes a sophisticated strategy for avoiding vulnerability altogether. Pluto and Venus are working together to reveal the difference. Beneath intellectual analysis, beneath logic, beneath observation, there may be a fear that few people ever see. The fear of allowing someone close enough to truly matter. The fear that complete openness creates risk. The fear that lowering every defense could result in disappointment, rejection, or emotional injury. Those fears are deeply human. Yet they become limiting when they prevent authentic intimacy from developing. Today's opposition places that reality directly in front of you. There may be someone in your life who has spent considerable time attempting to bridge the emotional distance between you. A partner, a romantic interest, someone who wants connection beyond conversation, an understanding beyond analysis. They may have been searching for warmth while encountering walls, seeking presence while finding distance, reaching for closeness while meeting caution. The energy of today creates a decisive moment. You can continue protecting yourself behind familiar defenses, or you can choose something more difficult but infinitely more rewarding. You can allow yourself to be seen. Not the polished version, not the intellectual version, the genuine version, the vulnerable version, the human version. The universe is not asking you to abandon your individuality. It is asking you to discover that intimacy does not require its sacrifice. True connection and personal freedom can exist together. But that discovery demands courage, and the opportunity to make that choice exists now, rather than at some future point when every uncertainty has been analyzed away. Then we arrive at Scorpio, where the intensity reaches another level entirely. Scorpio, today's configuration, places you in a uniquely sensitive position. While Leo and Aquarius are experiencing the opposition directly, you are receiving the concentrated pressure generated by both sides simultaneously. Venus and Pluto are each forming challenging 90-degree squares to your sign, creating what astrologers identify as a T-square formation, with Scorpio occupying the apex point. In practical terms, this means the emotional charge flowing between Venus and Pluto is being funneled directly through your experience. You are not merely witnessing this tension. You are carrying it. You are processing it. You are becoming the vessel through which it seeks expression and resolution. And what makes this especially significant is the target of that pressure. The issue being activated did not begin recently. It did not begin with the current relationship. It did not begin this year. It may reach far beyond present circumstances, into patterns that have accompanied you for a very long time. Patterns so old they can feel woven into the fabric of your identity itself. As this energy intensifies, Scorpio is being asked to confront something deeply rooted, something that has traveled through countless experiences, waiting for the moment when it could finally be transformed, and that moment is arriving now. For Scorpio, the story unfolding under today's sky reaches far beyond a single relationship, a single disagreement, or even a single chapter of your life. What is being activated now runs deeper than current circumstances. It extends into patterns that may have existed long before you arrived here, patterns carried through family histories, emotional inheritances, and unspoken lessons passed from one generation to the next. The pressure created by this Venus and Pluto configuration is digging beneath the visible layers and exposing the foundations underneath. It is drawing attention to the way love was modeled for you, the way authority was exercised within your family system, the invisible rules that shaped relationships long before you consciously understood them. Somewhere in those inherited dynamics are stories about who leads and who follows, who sacrifices and who receives, who expresses emotion and who suppresses it, who maintains power and who surrenders it. These stories often become so familiar that they feel natural. Yet familiarity does not make them healthy, and today's energy is making that distinction impossible to overlook. You may notice conflicts emerging that feel strangely familiar, as though the emotional script has already been written. A disagreement with a partner may trigger reactions that seem larger than the situation itself. A struggle involving trust, authority, or emotional control may carry an intensity that feels older than the present moment. There is a reason for that. What you are encountering may not belong entirely to the present. It may be an echo of patterns repeated again and again through your personal history and family lineage. The circumstances appear new, but the emotional architecture beneath them is ancient. It is as though a signal has been transmitted through generations without ever being interrupted, repeating itself through different people, different relationships, and different eras while carrying the same underlying lesson. Today's alignment shines a powerful light directly onto that signal. Because Scorpio naturally understands emotional depth, hidden motivations, and the complex dynamics of power, Pluto's influence reaches you with exceptional precision. There is nowhere to hide from this level of self-awareness. The questions emerging now may feel uncomfortable because they require absolute honesty. Where have you been attempting to maintain influence through subtle forms of emotional leverage? Where have you held back affection in order to create a desired outcome? Where have protective instincts gradually transformed into possessiveness? Where have fears about loss inspired behaviors that limit freedom rather than strengthen connection? These realizations are not arriving as accusations. They are arriving as opportunities. Pluto's purpose is not punishment. Pluto's purpose is transformation. The truth becoming visible today is meant to release you from cycles that have survived only because they remained hidden. What is ending is not your power. What is ending is your dependence on control as a substitute for security. This distinction matters enormously. For many Scorpios, control has functioned as a survival mechanism. It may have provided stability during uncertain periods. It may have created a sense of protection when trust felt risky. It may have helped navigate situations where vulnerability seemed dangerous. Those strategies served a purpose. They helped you survive previous chapters of life. Yet survival mechanisms are not always suitable for the future they helped create. At some point, what once protected begins restricting. What once preserved safety begins limiting growth. Today's transit represents that turning point. Relationships built primarily upon old defenses, emotional armor, and inherited fears may struggle to continue because their foundation belongs to a version of you that is no longer meant to lead your life. Allowing those structures to fall away is not failure. It is evolution. What emerges afterward has the potential to be far healthier than anything sustained through fear alone. In many ways, you are being offered an opportunity to build what previous generations may never have believed was possible. A relationship rooted in truth rather than control. A connection sustained by trust rather than emotional bargaining. A partnership that grows through authenticity rather than fear of loss. Yet before that future can be created, the past must loosen its grip. And that brings us to the larger purpose hidden behind everything unfolding now. If the intensity of today's opposition feels overwhelming, it is important to remember that destruction is not the final chapter of this story. The universe is not exposing these truths simply to leave you standing among the ruins. There is a larger cycle unfolding. There is a reason the timing matters. In only 2 days, on June 19th, Chiron enters Taurus for the first time in more than 40 years. Chiron, often associated with the wounded healer, begins an entirely new chapter as it moves into a sign governed by Venus herself. This detail is profoundly significant. The same Venus currently facing Pluto in today's opposition will soon become connected to a long-term healing process unlike anything experienced in decades. What Pluto dismantles, Chiron begins helping rebuild. What Pluto reveals, Chiron begins helping heal. The process will not happen overnight. It unfolds over years. Yet the doorway opens now. Chiron in Taurus teaches a lesson that many people spend a lifetime trying to understand. Genuine security cannot be obtained through controlling circumstances, controlling people, or controlling outcomes. It cannot be permanently secured through status, appearances, financial achievements, or external validation. Real safety develops internally. It is cultivated within the body, within the nervous system, within the quiet certainty that your worth exists independently of performance. It is the realization that you deserve love, not because you proved yourself worthy of it, not because you achieved enough, sacrificed enough, or impressed enough people. You deserve love because your existence itself carries value. As this understanding gradually strengthens, many of the fears driving unhealthy relationship dynamics begin losing their power. Then, another important shift arrives. On June 25th, Venus forms a supportive trine with Saturn, the planetary force associated with structure, commitment, responsibility, and long-term stability. This means the insights gained through today's challenges do not simply disappear. The boundaries established now can become lasting. The truths acknowledged now can become foundations. The conversations that seem difficult today can become the framework for healthier relationships moving forward. Saturn helps transform realization into reality. It gives durability to lessons that might otherwise fade, and the story continues evolving. On June 30th, Jupiter enters Leo, marking its first visit to that sign in more than a decade. Jupiter brings expansion, opportunity, growth, and blessing wherever it travels. As it enters the sign associated with the heart, self-expression, courage, and authentic love, an entirely new chapter begins opening. This is why today's events matter so much. The clearing taking place now is not meaningless loss. Space is being created. What leaves is making room for what is meant to arrive. Every illusion removed, every unhealthy attachment released, every outdated pattern exposed creates greater capacity for something more aligned with your future. The discomfort was never the destination. It was preparation. The challenges appearing today are not designed to break your spirit. They are designed to remove what can no longer support your growth. What remains afterward has the potential to be stronger, healthier, and more authentic than anything built upon avoidance or illusion. This is why today represents a moment of truth rather than a moment of punishment. Some relationships will emerge stronger because they are rooted in honesty. Others may fall away because they were already sustained by structures that could not endure scrutiny. The difference is not determined today. The difference existed long before today arrived. This alignment simply reveals it. The cosmos is not attempting to take something valuable from you. It is attempting to free you from what has quietly limited you. It is removing the pressure to perform, the need to pretend, and the exhaustion that comes from maintaining versions of love that never truly nourished the soul. Today is the day when appearances lose their authority and truth gains its voice. Today is the day when fear no longer controls the narrative. Today is the day when reality becomes visible. So allow yourself to experience what arises. Do not rush to suppress it. Do not immediately explain it away. Do not distract yourself from what is asking to be acknowledged. Every feeling carries information. Every realization carries purpose. Every crack appearing in the old structure creates an opening through which something more authentic can emerge. On the other side of this process is a deeper understanding of love, one grounded not in illusion, but in truth. And whether you realize it or not, the truth has been moving toward you all along. If you have stayed with me through this entire journey, thank you for sharing your time and attention. If these insights resonated with you and you would like to continue exploring future astrological guidance together, consider subscribing and becoming part of this growing community. I would also love to hear your experiences, reflections, and personal interpretations in the comments below. Until we meet again, take care of yourself, stay open to what is being revealed, and remember to subscribe for more meaningful insights in the days ahead.